Hello. Welcome everyone to my very first talk about anything. So my heart's like thumping at the moment, but I will get into it and it'll be fine. So I'm Andy, and this is what we do. So, thank you. Yeah, good afternoon. I'm really privileged and delighted to be here at FMX. I've watched these conferences since I first started out in 3D. So to be up here is pretty mental, to be honest with you. But I want to start with a confession that I want to share with everyone. And that confession is, I don't really know what I'm doing. Does anyone else feel like that? Yeah, good. We all don't really know what we're doing most of the time, and I think it's stepping into that unknown that really has fueled my journey from being a motion designer to being a creative director. And being a creative director is a much different set of circumstances than being a motion designer. You definitely don't spend as much time in software that you love, like Houdini, but it's that continuous cycle of learning, experimenting, and not really knowing what we're doing that pushes us forward. So I'm going to give you a quick little run through of me, so we get to know each other and we feel a bit more comfortable. So I was born in a little town outside of London called Gravesend. Fun fact, well, not really a fun fact, it's where Pocahontas died. From a young age, I was set on becoming a rock star and dedicated my creative energy to mastering the guitar. My dad worked at BT and brought home an old computer one day, and I stumbled upon this old disc that had some photo software on it. I started using it to make silly pictures of me and my friends and posters, and then I moved to the south of England to study at a university called Dartington College of Arts to study contemporary music. And that's where I discovered hangovers, and that Photoshop had a motion counterpart called After Effects. And during this time, I met my amazing wife, and she wanted to buy a house, and I realized I wasn't going to become a rock star. So she got me a job as a motion designer. But I didn't really know what a motion designer was, but it did introduce me to this guy, Andrew Kramer, and I was hooked. I learned everything I could from this guy in VFX and After Effects. And I lost my train of thought there. But then after that, the evolution from After Effects was back into 3D, and then I stumbled across this guy, Nick, from Grayscale Gorilla. And I watched tons of videos of football boots and trainers. I was completely hooked in 3D. Around the same time of getting into 3D, I had my beautiful son. This was also the time that I got more and more into 3D and came across these guys. I didn't realize how weird this was until just now. But the Intagma guys really opened up Houdini to me and made me realize that there was so much more possible in 3D and animation, especially from a motion graphics perspective as opposed to a VFX perspective. And this all happened getting into Houdini at the start of the global crisis, which I won't name. But also, weirdly, at the same time as this happening, me and a few mates decided to start a company called Baked. And this is where the transition from 3D motion design to becoming a creative director began for me. So yeah, hey, I'm Andy. I'm co-founder and creative director at Baked. And I'm going to go through some of our creative process at Baked and how Houdini fits in with us. we're going to talk a little bit about Baked and what we do and the creative network that we work with. And then I'm going to get into one of our projects, the Timberland project, so you can sort of see how some of this has been set up. So it started with the four of us. We all worked client-side, doing work for retailers like Sports Direct as an internal creative team. But we got to a certain point where we decided we were bored of watching all of the videos come to us that we had to redistribute out, and we wanted to have the fun, and we wanted to do the good stuff. And I come from a school of collaboration, and very much believe in bringing all of the different disciplines together to create something brilliant. So yeah, we're not quite the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, but we've got Dan, who's the businessman, myself that does the 3D, Cal's the traveller that is our live action director, and G is our designer. And bringing design, live action, and marketing together with strategy and 3D motion design means that we can create these really impactful pieces for the client, for consumers, and for the clients. Yeah, so we've got all these, now we're a team of 15 of us down in the south of England, out of the city, thank God. We're a multi-disciplinary agency, yeah, so we do work for brands like Timberland, Under Armour, Haglofs, ASICS, and we handle a lot of the creative direction in-house, but we don't do it alone. We're part of a much bigger extended family of creatives, amazing freelancers, and they all collaborate on these projects with us to really bring these pieces to life. And we like to have a little bit of fun as well. So every year we make our little Christmas film and we bring everyone on camera just so we can sort of have a fart about and enjoy it. But yeah, talking about our extended network, I want to talk about this guy here, Bastian, who's been a massive key member in the extended Baked family. He's been really crucial to helping me realise some of the goals that I had in 3D and some of the things that I wanted to achieve. He talked off a couple of weeks ago, so please go and check that talk out. It's great for anyone that's new to Houdini and is really trying to learn to step into that space. He's a really good teacher for that. Because initially, yeah, I was on my own and I had these great ideas and all these things that I wanted to do, but I didn't have the time and maybe the knowledge to be able to execute them client-side for production. And I'm going to really quickly touch on this project that was one of the first projects we did for ASICS. And they came to us and was like, we need like 3 product videos. And I said, okay, let's do it in Houdini. But I'd never really done anything in production in Houdini before. And I reached out to a guy called Simon Fielder. I don't know if you know him. He's an amazing artist as well. And he worked in the same studio with Bastian and brought them on for this job. I'm going to quickly show you the spot now, and then I'm going to just show you a little bit of R&D from this, just to sort of to give my perspective on how impactful it was to me that I could come up with an idea, I could create simple animatics, and then work with experienced TDs to really realize this and add detail. And this is all about adding layers of detail for me. So this was 4 years ago that we did this project, and we were just coming out of lockdown, and ASICS were talking about sound mind and sound body, and they really wanted to focus on that sort of sense of peace when you're running, as opposed to any of the real technical elements of the product. But we still need to talk about technology with the consumer, and the consumer doesn't always want to know the real technical nature of something. They want to feel what the technology is like and get the emotion from it. And so that's why we really lent into, I always lean into metaphors when it comes to technology, visual metaphors, ways that we can play and have fun when we're talking about stuff that can sometimes be generic and boring, to be honest. So I'm not going to go into detail about this, but a couple of years ago at FMX, Bastian and Simon did a talk where they go into this setup in a lot more detail, and I recommend you go and see it, because when I watched it, it really just started my journey in Houdini of realizing that I just need to break down all of these things into simple steps to understand what it is what I wanted to go, rather than try and go into the details straight away. It's about bringing in things in those sort of layering terms. So yeah, so when Bastian sent me this first round of like dailies, we were sending every day, and we only had like a couple of weeks to do this. I was just like, wow, this is nuts that we can actually like make this. And this was all done without KineFX as well, because I don't think Bastian had been working in KineFX at that point. And so, you could drive all of this with fall-offs. It was all sort of like really sort of like responsive. It was a great setup. I really enjoyed this. And it looks sexy when you render it as well. So, I'm going backwards. This is what we do. We do product. So apart from making Christmas films and being silly, our core focus at Baked revolves around product promotion. We engage with every aspect of the client's journey, from receiving the brief, creating the concept, all the way through to delivery, whether it's live action, 3D, stills, e-com. We take part in every single part of that process. But our primary task is straightforward: sell the product, make people want to buy it, make the technology interesting. So what we aim to do is highlight the features and the benefits of the product in ways that captivate the audience and pique their curiosity, and it will lead them down this journey of discovery. But the landscape for creative studios is undergoing some really significant transformations. And I've only been here a day, and some of the talks have been absolutely incredible, and the artists and the studios, it's mind-blowing to me. And we're a small creative studio, and advancements like AI, this technology, it's not just a tool, it's reshaping our entire approach to the creative process. It influences the way that we manage tasks and innovate. And today, versatility and speed are not just advantageous, they're essential. So this brings me to the role of the creative generalist. In an era where adaptability is key, having a broad set of skills is invaluable. We're no longer just specialists in one area. We need to be proficient in a range of skills. For myself personally, sometimes I need to be proficient in lighting, rendering, rigging, working with vellum systems, RBDs, VDBs, particle operations, crafting landscapes. The list is continuously growing. It's our ability to navigate these diverse areas quickly and effectively that sets us apart. At Baked, our approach embodies this. We believe that we should all be generalists in what we do and not focus in on one task, but have a scope across everything else. And Houdini gives us the ability to evolve creative ideas as our skills and knowledge base grow. Our ability to becomes only limited by imagination, the time we have, the budget we have to be able to expand the team. And, with things like we're just sort of diving into now with Solaris, that too is now giving us ability to iterate faster, to come up with more style frames, to work with more artists in a way that for small studios had not been possible before. So now the small studios, the small creative teams can do so much more today than when I first started in the industry. And that's inspired me, and it continues to inspire me to know what essentially two people can do versus teams of other studios of hundreds of artists working together. So the first talk I want to talk about is one of our most recent projects for Timberland, for their new motion scramble boot. So I'm going to play the spot that we released first, and I'm going to take you a little bit through the creative process. Yeah, so my scribbles. So our approach to creating a tech-focused product video, it really varies with each brief. And for this project, it started with something called the sell-in phase. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with the sell-in phase, basically the client needs to go out and sell the product to distributors and get them to buy the product from them that then they can go and sell through their retail stores. And traditionally, this is done with mood boards, but sometimes we get given CADs from the client, and with ridiculously short timelines. I think we did this selling video in about 2 weeks from start to finish. And because we have those tight timelines, we're not always afforded the pleasure of R&D time to experiment with technology, how it's going to show up, that sometimes we do have that time on projects. But for this one, it was all in my head, so I drew it out really quickly. Our 3D lead artist in the studio, Raphael, amazing animator. He takes my scribbles and understands them, which is why we work well together. He'll pull together the initial animatic. And that animatic will probably not necessarily have some of the detailed FX or growth sims or whatever it is that we want to do, but it's just important for us to get something out as quickly as possible that we can get across to the client and get them to say, yeah, we like this, we like the way that you're talking about technology. And when it comes to the style frames, we work with our designers. We've got a team of 3 designers based in the UK and in Barcelona. And we share back and forth our style frames. So I'll create something, or a 3D artist will create something, and then we share it with the designer. They'll iterate on it and share it back with us. And we do this ping-pong effect back and forth. And the reason we do that is because we've all got different perspectives on the way something looks. And I think that you can only be as strong as the sum of your parts. So I think we've always found that we come up with better lighting, colors, layout, graphics when we share information back and forth in this way. So a little segue into HDAs. So we use HDAs and create our own HDAs continuously, and they're constantly evolving. They range from the simplest of HDAs, like the point deform, where I've literally just packaged a point deform with the time shift in it, to things that are a little bit more complicated, like the foam setup, where we've sort of done a really nice expanding foam setup, and we might want to use that in future projects and be able to iterate on it. But I look at HDAs as bookmarks for your work, not as finished products. You can always go into them, change them, evolve them per project. It's like a nice starting point when you know that if you're getting client work in, like we do a lot of shoes, a lot of the technology seems to be the same, but you've got to find ways of evolving it. So having good starting places in these HDAs are a really good place to find that beginning jumping off point. Because things like this, foam setups, vellum, if you work in Houdini, no doubt you've done something very similar to this. I know that I've made this setup numerous times, so each time I make that setup, I try and find efficient, time-effective ways to speed it up for the next time that I know I'm going to need to do it. So I'm going to quickly play you the sell-in film that we did for Timberland now.
From the very beginning, we were an out-of-doors kind of brand.
Yeah, so how did we end up here? But just before I go into that, that selling film is paying us back now still, because the setup, the animation, the tech points that we did for that, we've just received probably last week from Timberland a request to do 2 or 3 more of these sell-in films for iterations on that shoe and iterations on the technology. We know that they're not going to go consumer-facing, but we know that we want to find a good way for the client to be able to communicate technology and show the product off to their retailers in a way that's going to get them on board from that stage earlier as well. And it means that we can do these really quickly because of the way that we set up the scene files and because of the way that we've developed the tech metaphors as well. But after we turned around this selling content, we were approached by Timberland to put together their entire campaign for the Spring/Summer 24 season. And that included not only just doing a tech video for the shoe, but it also included doing the go-to-market hero video, all of the e-com stuff, the whole shebang. Well, that meant that we were going to go and film and do photography out in California. So we really wanted to place the product in the environment where it was going to be and really show the technology in action in the environment it was going to be. And that meant that we had to step into something that I didn't know what I was doing, which was building environments, because I'd never done anything like that before. But the amazing thing about Houdini and the technology that it's got within that is that I can easily work within that same environment with the animation and build a landscape and do all the extra things, and Houdini just does it. It just handles it perfectly. Yeah. Oh, and now we've started working in Unreal as well. So being able to sort of like build these environments and landscapes and create nice procedural tools in Houdini and export it straight away and get it straight in Unreal so we can see live lighting and live scattering. The relationship between the two is just great. But yeah, with environment, we start here. There is a little bit of AI in here. I don't know if you can tell which one's the AI image is. But that's sort of an area where I think that it really comes into play is taking references and generating original references off the back of that. So no longer are we pulling from the pool of references that every other artist is pulling from. We can generate our own original references. But yeah, as same as every environment artist, right? We start with our references. We start comping in, getting an idea and a feel of where we want the shoe, the placement, how we're going to scatter things, what does that look and marry up with the California environment that we've just been shooting in. Because we actually started this project after we did the shoot in California, sort of like raced back and then had like no time at all to finish everything. But it meant that we had a much better understanding of the landscape and could capture the feel of it a little bit more in the final spot. Yeah, we did trees and then started to get the scattering using the new jitter node in Redshift as well for the trees is just like amazing if you haven't tried that out. Yeah, and then we did our animatic. So we got this animatic done. We sent it off to the client. We didn't do any of the effects in this animatic apart from a base fracture effect there, just because we wanted to get them to sign off on the way that we were going to talk about all of the technology and also to give Bastian a little bit of time to make the effects work happen. But we knew that there was going to be 3 key tech points here. We knew we had grip, waterproof, and comfort. And for that, we were going to do a fracture setup, a water splash simulation, and some foam, because everyone loves foam. So yeah, I'm going to go a little bit into this scene briefly. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I just want to give you an idea of the structure and really the key part of Houdini that I love so much, which is being able to layer detail. We can start with something basic, and if we've got the time, then we can just keep adding detail, and we can just keep going until we run out of time. Really, there's so much you can do with it. But in terms of the scene, we work really similarly to this on every single project we do. We always keep our working nodes green, geo nodes green, and anything that's going to render, we can set as in the ROP network to only render anything that's got RNDR at the front of the geo node. So if we forget to turn something on or we forget to turn something off, it's not going to get in our render, and that saves us a lot of hiccups and yeah, because I'm not that tidy a worker, I'll be honest. yeah, so we've got the bake scene start here. This is one of our HDAs. I'm sure if you haven't built one of these yourself, they're very easy to do, and it's definitely worth doing to keep a consistent sort of like work. As soon as we start the project, so we know every time we cache something, every time we render something, every time we save a file, all the naming convention is going to be consistent. And then we've evolved this setup. So we didn't used to have this HUD overlay in there, which is why it's not in any of our animatics. But we were getting to a point where when it came to render time, we were running out of time to render everything the way that we wanted to and get it to look as good as we wanted to. So we could only really render out the exact frames that were in the final edit that was agreed by the client. So by having a HUD overlay like this, it gave us the ability to look at exactly what frames were in that final edit that got signed off and get them rendered, so we could just get them out and get them over to the client. And then when the project was over, we could go back to all these scenes and render the whole shots out like the way we wanted to do and do our director's cut of it. But when you're working under such time constrictions, little things, little speed boosts like this are super important. So yeah, the fracture setup. Things like being able to create our collision geometry, we need to obviously remesh that geometry, that VDB, but we can't remesh every frame because it takes ages and it's a stupid way of doing it. So we time shift and freeze that position, but we need to get that animation back, which is where the extract transform node comes in, which I absolutely love this node. I think the guys that were doing the Society of the Snows was talking about the Alembic transform as well. And these transform nodes are brilliant because we can move things into a simulated space, do everything we need to, and then just copy it back to that singular point, because all of that pivot orientation, all that data is saved on that just single point where that animation was. And then we get into the fracture setup. So it's really normal sort of standard sort of fracture setup. We use the RBD material fracture and all those things. But one thing we did do in the animatic phase, because we needed to get something out really quickly, is use this great HDA called Boombox. I recommend you go check it out if you need to do really quick fracture setups. It's essentially everything that's in Houdini, but packaged up in a way that's a little bit quicker to use for us. So we don't always use this. We just used it on this project because it was in the animatic. But off the back of just that one fracture animation, and then we move into being able to layer in detail. So the layering, the next layer of detail was our pyro. And all of that is still driven from the fracture that we created originally. So the procedural nature of this is amazing. So if we want to go back and change the fracture, that's going to have a knock-on effect to the pyro. Because that RBD material fracture, there's this great node called the debris source node, which I absolutely love. I didn't really know about it until this project. And it just takes that inside group that's generated during the fracture setup, and then you can just add an attribute to it. So we've added the age attribute there. So when we get into that pop simulation, it dies off, and that's going to then help us when we get into the pyro sim. So yeah, we rasterize all of our smoke and get it into that pyro sim, and then we've got lovely fracture-y, smoky stuff, which is really cool. And the same goes for the debris and the dust and everything off the back of that. The same setup, essentially. Copy to points, all of the pieces that we create using that debris source to generate the points alongside the pop sim. And then finally, the water. So again, I'm not going to go into it too much, but this was definitely one of those simulations where we needed it to be zeroed out, right, in space, to be able to use the gravity and to really be able to tweak that flips sim. We need to be in a space where we can sort of control what's going on a little bit more. And yeah, peak the mesh and paint our mask, scatter the points where that mask was. Copy the sphere over, and then we've sort of got our vellum sim, and then a vellum fluid sim. And then we use that extract transform again, and we can just put that simulation straight back onto that original animation. So this way of working for me is really great because it allows our animators the freedom to really go for it on the animation and not be fearful of what we can do with the VFX and some of the more technical elements, because we know that we can like put it back to that original animation afterwards. Yeah. So I think that's it. That's all I've got. This is some of the look dev stuff we've been doing in Solaris now with the USDs, of being able to, so all this is done in Solaris. We wanted to sort of try and create a system where we could quickly look through all of our assets or some of the sims that we've done. We can play with the lighting and all this sort of stuff. It's taken a little bit of time for us to get our heads around it all and making it work efficiently. But I think that coming from things from a motion design perspective as opposed to a VFX perspective, we're going to use tools and look at the way we can use Houdini in a different way. And I think that's one of the really unique, great things about Houdini. But I'm going to leave you with this quote from Marcus Aurelius. The universe is change, and our life is what our thoughts make it. And really important to just please continue to not know what you're doing. And we should embrace the unknown and continue to change how we work. Because more importantly than ever before, enjoying this sort of like vast space that we've got as artists, and to imagine what's possible, and we want to strive to make that happen. So your thoughts and your creativity are absolutely the most powerful tools that we have. So thank you for having me here today, and I'd love to chat with any of you afterwards.
Very cool. Inspirational for sure. Any questions, comments? Yeah.
Hello. So my question is, when it comes to projects that there is a really complex shot that involves different departments, how do you handle maybe working with 10 people on a single shot?
Cool. Well, we've never worked with 10 people on a single shot, to be honest with you. We're such a small team. It's usually myself and Raf. We're the two artists out of 15 of us. We work in... thank you, yeah. With regards to that question, though, it's always not trying to think about how complex a shot is, but how to layer in that detail. And if you start with a fundamentally good animation, a solid base to work from, it's just layering the detail in. In terms of like working with them, we work with Bastian. He's our main TD that does a lot of the really complex setups. And I wouldn't say that I'm always the best at explaining. If anything, I give him way too much to do and too little time most of the time. But yeah, I would say that it's just start with the animation, have a good fundamental baseline, and then just know the layers of detail that you want to add to it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? If some motion designer were in your situation from a couple of years ago and they haven't used Houdini, they're interested in it, they've heard it, they've seen some of these sort of presentations, what would you suggest? What would their first steps be?
So if I talk about it from my perspective, being a Cinema 4D user and then moving into Houdini, the thing that I loved about Cinema was the MoGraph tools, and I loved getting the lights in there and making things look pretty, because when you're starting out, you want to get some validation for the time that you're putting into something. So you want to make something look good and think, hey, I did that. That's really cool. So I would get straight into Houdini, put some shiny spheres in a room, stick some lights on, and start doing some basic animation, because it's the basic animation and understanding some of those fundamental tools that will help evolve you into the more complex setups. Vellum is like a really great tool to start working with because it's so easy to get into and you can get really impressive results really quickly. I think don't get scared by the nodes. It's easy to get scared by the nodes. You've just got to change your way of thinking a little bit.
Excellent. Good answer. Thanks. Anyone else? Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you. So are you doing everything in Houdini, like from the animation, like through to like everything, the modeling, or do you get the head data?
Yeah, so for example, with like asset creation, we work with a company called FBFX. They do a lot of like stuff with like film and costume and stuff, but they've got a small department, and we've been working with them for about 4 or 5 years. So they started off as one guy just doing photogrammetry and creating assets, and now they've got like a scanner and all sorts of things, and they've sped up as we've sped up. And so we work with them to get our assets prepped and ready, because that's a very time-consuming task that we can't do in-house. In terms of like other software, we have used Cinema for some basic animation, and what I've started to realize, because I learned Houdini and I love working in that space, and we do everything in Houdini, but I want to work with more artists. I want to work with more of you guys and use your creative talent. So I have to be aware and find ways of being able to integrate these other different pieces of software. I don't think that anyone should be using one piece of software. I think it's just a type of a tool that does really good at one thing. It's really a great tool, but we should be able to use all different sorts of things like oils and crayons and different palettes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks.
Great presentation.
Cheers. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.